The thundering hooves of Kieran Maddox's stallion kicked up a cloud of dust as he raced against the setting sun. His weathered Stetson pulled low over his eyes. The year was 1878, and the harsh Wyoming Territory landscape stretched endlessly before him, a canvas of burnt orange and deep purple as daylight faded into dusk. He was too late, perhaps, but he'd made a promise to Faith Porter, and Kieran Maddox was a man of his word. Faith paced the confines of her bedroom, the floorboards creaking beneath her boots. Her fingers nervously twisted the lace trim of her sleeves as she peered out the window for the 100th time. The Porter family ranch house sat nestled in a valley, surrounded by rolling plains and distant mountains. At 22, Faith had grown weary of her father's iron rule and her 3 older brothers' suffocating protection. 6 months ago, she'd met Kieran at the general store in town, and her carefully ordered world had tilted on its axis. "He's not coming, Faith," her father, Samuel Porter, called from downstairs. "And even if he does, that drifter won't be welcome in this house." Faith bit her lip, fighting back tears. "He's not a drifter, Pa. He's a rancher with his own land now." "Land bought with blood money from bounty hunting," her oldest brother Thomas spat. "No decent man makes his living that way." Faith closed her eyes. They didn't understand. Kieran had taken bounties to save enough for his ranch, to build something that would last. He'd put that life behind him now, but her family refused to see beyond his past. The distant sound of hoofbeats made her heart leap. She pressed her face against the glass, spotting the familiar silhouette approaching their ranch. Kieran had come after all. Samuel Porter's face hardened as he moved to the front door. "Thomas, get your rifle. James, William, make sure your sister stays upstairs." Faith's brothers moved with grim determination. James and William positioning themselves at the foot of the stairs, while Thomas retrieved his Winchester from the gun cabinet. Kieran slowed his horse as he approached the Porter homestead. The windows glowed with lamplight against the gathering darkness, smoke curling from the chimney. He'd spent weeks preparing for this moment, getting his ranch in order, making sure everything was perfect before he came to ask Faith to be his wife. He dismounted, patting his horse's neck before securing the reins to the hitching post. His boots crunched on the gravel path as he approached the door, a small velvet box tucked safely in his vest pocket. He'd barely raised his hand to knock when the door swung open. Samuel Porter stood framed in the doorway, his sons flanking him like sentries. Thomas held his rifle casually, but Kieran recognized the threat for what it was. "Mr. Porter," Kieran touched the brim of his hat respectfully, "I've come to speak with Faith." "My daughter isn't receiving visitors tonight, Maddox," Samuel replied coldly, "or any night as far as you're concerned." Kieran maintained his composure, though his jaw tightened. "Sir, I believe that should be Faith's decision." Thomas stepped forward. "My sister has already decided. She wants nothing to do with a man who's made his fortune hunting other men." "That's a lie," Faith's voice carried from inside the house, followed by sounds of a struggle as her brothers restrained her. Samuel's expression didn't change. "Go back to wherever you came from, Maddox. There's nothing for you here." Before Kieran could respond, the door slammed shut. He heard the definitive sound of the lock turning, followed by Faith's muffled protests. Kieran stood there, stunned by the finality of it. He considered his options. He could leave, come back another day, or try to reason with Samuel Porter again. But the thought of riding away, of leaving Faith when she was clearly trying to reach him, sat like a stone in his gut. With deliberate movements, Kieran settled himself on the porch steps. If they wouldn't let him in, he'd wait Faith out. She'd find a way to him, he was certain of it. Inside the house, Faith fought against her brother's restraining hands. "Let me go. You have no right to keep me from him." "We have every right," James insisted, his grip firm but not cruel. You're our sister, and we won't let you throw your life away on a man like that." "A man like what?" Faith demanded, wrenching free. "Hard-working, honest, kind," William snorted. "Kind. He's killed men for money, Faith." "He brought criminals to justice," she corrected. "And he's left that life behind. He has a ranch now, a future." Samuel stepped away from the door, his face grim. "No daughter of mine will marry a bounty hunter. I won't have it. I'm 22 years old, Pa. You can't decide who I love." "As long as you live under my roof, you'll abide by my rules," Samuel countered. "Now go to your room and forget about that man." Faith's eyes flashed. "I will not forget him, and if you won't welcome him into our home, then perhaps I don't belong here either." Her father's face paled. "You choose him over your family. A man you've known for mere months over the people who have loved you your entire life." Faith faltered, torn between her loyalty to her family and her feelings for Kieran. Without answering, she turned and fled upstairs to her room, tears streaming down her face. Hours passed. The Porter household settled into an uneasy quiet. Faith sat by her window, watching Kieran's steadfast figure on the porch steps. He hadn't moved, hadn't given up. The sight of him there, waiting for her despite her family's rejection, made her heart ache with both love and despair. Her bedroom door creaked open and her mother, Elizabeth Porter, slipped inside. Unlike her husband and sons, Elizabeth's face held concern rather than anger. "He's still there," Elizabeth said softly, joining Faith at the window. Faith nodded, wiping away tears. "He won't leave without seeing me." Elizabeth sighed, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Your father means well, Faith. He's trying to protect you." "I don't need protection from Kieran. He would never hurt me." "It's not physical harm your father fears," Elizabeth explained. "He's worried about your future, about the life you'd have with a man whose reputation follows him like a shadow." Faith turned to her mother, eyes pleading. "I love him, Ma, and he loves me. Isn't that what matters most?" Elizabeth studied her daughter's face, seeing the woman she'd become rather than the child she'd raised. "Love is important, but it isn't always enough. Life is hard out here. You need more than feelings to build a lasting marriage. Kieran has changed. He has a ranch now, good land with water rights. He's building something real." Faith reached for her mother's hands. "All I'm asking is for the chance to choose my own path." Elizabeth squeezed her daughter's fingers. "I'll speak to your father, but I can't promise anything. He's a stubborn man." "Thank you, Ma," Faith whispered, embracing her mother tightly. After Elizabeth left, Faith made her decision. She couldn't leave her family, not forever, but she couldn't abandon Kieran either. Quietly, she gathered a few necessities in a small bag, then slipped on her boots and coat. The house had gone silent. Her father and brothers had retired for the night, confident that their show of force had been sufficient. Faith eased her window open, thankful that her room was on the first floor at the side of the house. She'd snuck out this way as a teenager to watch meteor showers or simply enjoy moments of solitude away from her overprotective family. Now, she was using it to reach the man she loved. Her boots hit the soft earth with barely a sound. Staying close to the shadows, she made her way around to the front of the house where Kieran maintained his vigil. His head was bowed, hat resting on his knee as if in prayer. "Kieran," she whispered, stepping into the moonlight. He looked up, exhaustion vanishing from his face as he rose to his feet. "Faith." They moved toward each other like magnets drawn together by forces beyond their control. When his arms encircled her, Faith felt the rightness of it down to her bones. "I'm sorry about my family," she murmured against his chest. "Don't apologize," he replied, his voice a soothing rumble. "They love you, they're trying to protect you." Faith looked up at him, marveling at his understanding. "I need to talk to you, but not here. They'll wake soon." Kieran nodded, leading her toward his horse. They walked in silence until they reached a small copse of trees near the creek that bordered the Porter property. The moon's reflection danced on the water, providing just enough light for them to see each other. "I can't leave them, Kieran," Faith said, her voice breaking. "They're my family, but I can't give you up either." Kieran took her hands in his. "I would never ask you to choose, Faith. Family is precious. I know that better than most, having lost mine so young. What are we going to do?" she asked, searching his face for answers. "I came here tonight to ask you something," Kieran said, reaching into his vest pocket. He withdrew the small velvet box, opening it to reveal a modest but beautiful gold ring with a single pearl. "It was my mother's. I've carried it with me since she died, waiting for the day I'd find someone worthy of wearing it." Faith's breath caught as he knelt before her, the moonlight silvering his dark hair. "Faith Porter, I love you more than I thought possible. I want to build a life with you, a good, honest life. Will you marry me?" Tears filled Faith's eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you, Kieran Maddox." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to pull her into a passionate kiss that spoke of promises and dreams and a future together. When they finally parted, Faith pressed her forehead against his. "My father won't change his mind easily," she warned. "Then I'll have to prove myself worthy," Kieran replied with determination. "I'm not giving up on us, Faith. Not ever." "Neither am I," she promised. "But I need time to make them understand. Can you give me that?" Kieran nodded. "I'd wait forever if that's what it took." They formulated a plan. Faith would return home before her absence was discovered. Kieran would go into town and speak with the minister about their intentions. Meanwhile, Faith would work on softening her family's stance, with her mother's help if possible. "Meet me tomorrow night at the old oak by Miller's Creek," Faith said as they walked back toward the house. "I'll tell you how things stand." Kieran agreed, kissing her once more before helping her sneak back to her window. He waited until she was safely inside before returning to his horse, his heart lighter despite the obstacles they faced. The following morning brought chaos to the Porter household. Faith's ring, which she'd hung on a chain around her neck to hide beneath her dress, caught the light as she reached across the breakfast table. Thomas noticed it immediately. "What's that?" he demanded, pointing at the telltale glint. Faith's hand flew to her neck, but it was too late. Her father's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Show me," Samuel commanded. With trembling fingers, Faith pulled the chain from beneath her collar, revealing Kieran's ring. "That man proposed to you." Samuel's voice was deadly quiet. "When? How?" "Last night," Faith admitted, lifting her chin defiantly. "I went to him after everyone was asleep." The kitchen erupted. Samuel slammed his fist on the table, making the dishes jump. Her brothers shouted over one another, their faces red with anger and betrayal. Only Elizabeth remained calm, her eyes sad but understanding. "I won't allow it," Samuel declared. "I forbid this marriage." "I'm of age, Pa," Faith replied steadily. "I don't need your permission." "You'll need my blessing if you want any part of this family going forward," he countered. "Choose now, Faith, him or us." Elizabeth intervened before Faith could respond. "Samuel, that's enough. You're angry and you're saying things you'll regret." "I won't regret protecting my daughter from ruining her life by forcing her to choose between the man she loves and her family," Elizabeth challenged. "How is that protecting her?" Samuel's jaw worked as he struggled with his wife's words. Finally, he turned to Faith. "The ring goes back. Today, I won't discuss this further." Faith clutched the ring tightly. "I can't do that, Pa. I've given my word." "Then pack your things," he said, his voice breaking slightly despite his harsh words. "You're no longer welcome here." "Samuel," Elizabeth gasped. Faith stood slowly, her heart breaking but her resolve firm. "If that's your decision, Pa, I'll respect it. But know this, I will marry Kieran Maddox, with or without your blessing." She left the kitchen with as much dignity as she could muster, ignoring her brother's calls to reconsider. In her room, Faith packed her belongings methodically, tears streaming down her face. She had known her father might react poorly, but she'd never imagined he would cast her out entirely. Elizabeth came to her as she was folding her best dress. "Your father doesn't mean it, Faith. Give him time to calm down." "He meant every word, Ma," Faith continued packing. "And I meant mine. I love Kieran. I'm going to marry him." Elizabeth sat on the bed, watching her daughter with sorrowful eyes. "Where will you go?" "Mrs. Henderson in town might take me in until the wedding. She's always said she could use help with her boarding house." "And after the wedding?" "Will you live on Maddox's ranch?" Faith nodded. "It's beautiful land, Ma. You'd like it. There's a small house now, but Kieran has plans to expand. We'll build a good life there." Elizabeth reached for Faith's hand, examining the pearl ring. "Your father fears Maddox's past will catch up to him, that you'll be in danger because of the men he's brought to justice. Kieran's been careful. Most of the bounties he collected were far from here, under a different name. Yet rumors follow him," Elizabeth pointed out gently. Faith sighed. "We can't live our lives afraid of what might happen, Ma. Any of us could face danger, a cattle stampede, a winter storm, disease. At least with Kieran, I'll face whatever comes with the man I love." Elizabeth studied her daughter's face, seeing the woman she'd become. With a small nod, she stood and moved to the door. "Finish packing. I'll speak to your father again." Faith continued her preparations, listening to the muffled sounds of her parents arguing downstairs. Their voices rose and fell like the wind before a storm, sometimes clear enough for her to catch phrases: her father's stubborn refusals, her mother's reasoned arguments. By midday, Faith was ready to leave. She carried her bags downstairs, finding her brothers waiting in the parlor. Their expressions had softened from anger to concern. "You're really doing this?" James asked, taking one of her bags despite his disapproval. "I am," Faith confirmed. Thomas shook his head. "I still think you're making a mistake, but I won't see you walking to town alone. I'll hitch up the wagon." "Thank you," Faith said, touched by the gesture. William, the youngest of her brothers and always the most sensitive, pulled her into a fierce hug. "Be careful, Faith, and know you can always come home if things don't work out." Faith returned his embrace, fighting fresh tears. "I know, Will. I love you all, even when you drive me to distraction." Samuel and Elizabeth emerged from the kitchen, their faces bearing evidence of their heated discussion. Samuel looked worn, the lines around his eyes deeper than Faith had ever noticed before. "Your mother has convinced me to reconsider my position," he said stiffly. "I won't disown you, Faith. This is still your home." Relief flooded through her. "Thank you, Pa. But," he continued, holding up a hand, "I'm not giving my blessing to this marriage, not yet. I want to meet with Maddox properly this time. If he truly loves you, he'll agree to my terms." Faith hesitated. "What terms?" He proves himself, shows he can provide for you, protect you, and most importantly, that he's truly left his past behind. It wasn't everything Faith had hoped for, but it was a start. "When?" "Bring him here for supper tomorrow night," Samuel said. "We'll talk then." Faith nodded, setting down her bags. "I'll tell him tonight. We're meeting at Miller's Creek." Samuel's lips thinned at this evidence of their planned rendezvous, but he said nothing further. Elizabeth squeezed Faith's hand, her eyes communicating silent support. That evening, Faith slipped out to meet Kieran as planned. He was already waiting by the ancient oak tree, his face lighting up when he saw her approaching through the tall grass. "Faith," he breathed, embracing her tightly. "I've been worried all day. I wasn't sure if you'd come." "Of course I came," she replied, rising on her tiptoes to kiss him. "Though it's been a difficult day." She explained everything: her father's initial reaction, her mother's intervention, and the tenuous peace they'd reached. Kieran listened intently, his expression growing serious. "So your father wants to meet with me," he summarized when she finished, "to determine if I'm worthy of you." Faith took his hands. "It's his way of trying to accept this. Will you come?" "I'll be there," Kieran promised. "And I'll answer whatever questions he has honestly. I have nothing to hide from your family, Faith." They spent another hour together, walking along the creek and planning their future. Kieran told her about the improvements he'd started on his ranch house, adding a proper kitchen and a second bedroom for the children they hoped to have someday. Faith shared her ideas for a garden and perhaps a few dairy cows to supplement their income. When they parted, it was with renewed hope. Perhaps tomorrow would be the beginning of reconciliation between the man she loved and the family she cherished. The following evening arrived with tense anticipation. Faith had spent the day helping her mother prepare a special meal: venison stew, fresh bread, and apple pie, while her father and brothers maintained a watchful silence. As the appointed hour approached, Faith changed into her best dress, a pretty blue calico that brought out the color of her eyes. Kieran arrived precisely on time, clean-shaven and wearing his Sunday best. He carried a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. Faith met him at the door, her heart swelling at the sight of him making this effort for her family. "You look beautiful," he murmured as she ushered him inside. The atmosphere in the Porter home was strained as introductions were made. Samuel's handshake was brief but not openly hostile. The brothers were coolly polite. Only Elizabeth showed genuine warmth. Thanking Kieran for coming and accepting the package, he'd brought a jar of honey from the hives he'd recently established on his property. Dinner was a quiet affair at first, with conversation limited to safe topics like the weather and local news. Faith watched anxiously as her father studied Kieran, measuring him against some internal standard she couldn't quite discern. Finally, as Elizabeth served the apple pie, Samuel set down his fork and addressed Kieran directly. "So, Maddox, you want to marry my daughter?" Kieran met his gaze steadily. "Yes, sir, more than anything." "And you think you can provide for her, keep her safe?" "I own 160 acres of good land with water rights," Kieran replied. "I've built a house, a barn, and corrals. I have 30 head of cattle, 6 horses, and I've just planted my first alfalfa field. It's not the biggest spread, but it's growing." Samuel nodded, acknowledging the achievement. "And what about your past? The men you've hunted might come looking for revenge." Kieran didn't flinch from the question. "I operated mostly in Colorado and New Mexico, under a different name. Only the marshals and my quarries knew me as a bounty hunter, and I never brought anyone in alive who might hold a grudge." "Yet rumors follow you," Thomas pointed out. "They do," Kieran agreed. "But I've been settled here for nearly a year now, and no trouble has found me. I believe my past is behind me, Mr. Porter. All I want now is to build a future with Faith." Samuel studied him intently. "My daughter says she loves you. That she's determined to marry you with or without my blessing." "That's true," Faith interjected, reaching for Kieran's hand. "But we both want your blessing, Pa. It matters to us." Samuel was quiet for a long moment, then sighed heavily. "I still have reservations, Maddox. But I can see you care for my daughter, and she certainly cares for you." Faith held her breath, hardly daring to hope. "I won't stand in your way," Samuel continued. "If Faith is determined to marry you, then she'll do so with her family present. But know this: if any harm comes to her because of your past, there won't be a place on this earth where you can hide from me." Kieran nodded solemnly. "I understand, sir, and I swear to you I'll protect Faith with my life." It wasn't exactly the warm blessing Faith had hoped for, but it was acceptance a beginning. She squeezed Kieran's hand gratefully. "Thank you, Pa," she said softly. The remainder of the evening passed more comfortably. Kieran spoke with James about cattle breeding and with William about the spring planting. He even managed to draw a reluctant smile from Thomas when discussing horseshoes. By the time he prepared to leave, the atmosphere had thawed considerably. At the door, Samuel pulled Faith aside while Elizabeth showed Kieran her prized rose bushes in the front yard. "Are you sure about this, daughter?" Samuel asked, his voice gruff with emotion. "Absolutely sure." Faith looked up at her father, the man who had taught her to ride, to shoot, to stand up for herself. "I'm sure, Pa, I love him." Samuel's eyes glistened suspiciously. "Then I suppose we'd better start planning a wedding." The news spread quickly through the small community. Faith Porter was marrying Kieran Maddox, the former bounty hunter turned rancher. Some whispered disapproval, others offered congratulations. Through it all, Faith and Kieran remained focused on their future together. The wedding took place 6 weeks later, on a perfect June morning. The Porter Ranch was transformed with wildflowers and ribbon. Neighbors and friends gathered to witness the union, curious to see the culmination of the romance that had begun with a cowboy sitting stubbornly on the Porter's porch steps, refusing to leave without seeing his beloved. Faith wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her smaller frame. Elizabeth had wept as she helped her daughter dress, placing a crown of forget-me-nots in her golden hair. "You look beautiful," Elizabeth whispered, adjusting the veil. "Kieran won't know what hit him." Faith's brothers escorted her to the ceremony, each one placing a kiss on her cheek before stepping aside. Even Thomas, who had been the most resistant to accepting Kieran, gave her hand a supportive squeeze. When Faith walked toward Kieran, who stood waiting beside the minister, the love in his eyes was unmistakable. Samuel Porter, watching from the front row, finally understood what his daughter had tried to tell him all along. This was no passing fancy, no youthful rebellion. What existed between Faith and Kieran was real and enduring. The vows were simple but heartfelt. Kieran promised to cherish Faith through all of life's challenges. Faith promised to stand by Kieran's side, come what may. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, their kiss sealed more than just their marriage. It represented the triumph of love over prejudice, of hope over fear. The celebration lasted well into the evening. There was dancing and feasting, laughter, and a few sentimental tears. Faith danced with her father, who held her close as if reluctant to let her go. "I was wrong about him," Samuel admitted quietly. "He's a good man." Faith smiled up at her father. "Thank you for giving him a chance, Pa." As the sun began to set, Faith and Kieran prepared to leave for their new home. Her family gathered to say goodbye, with promises to visit soon. Elizabeth pressed a package into Faith's hands, her grandmother's quilt, a wedding gift that had been passed down through generations. Kieran helped Faith into their wagon, which was decorated with ribbons and flowers by the local children. As they pulled away from the Porter Ranch, Faith looked back at her family standing together on the porch. Her father raised his hand in farewell, his expression no longer stern but proud. "Are you happy?" Kieran asked as they crested the hill that would take them toward their own land. Faith turned to him, her heart full. "More than I ever thought possible." He leaned over to kiss her, then urged the horses forward. Ahead of them lay their ranch, their home, their future. Behind them was the path that had brought them together, a path that had begun with a determined cowboy sitting on porch steps, refusing to give up on love. 5 years later, the Maddox Ranch had flourished into one of the most prosperous in the territory. The house had been expanded to accommodate their growing family, a 3-year-old son named Samuel, after Faith's father, and a 1-year-old daughter they'd named Elizabeth in honor of her grandmother. The Porters visited regularly, Samuel teaching young Sam to ride while Elizabeth doted on her granddaughter. The rift that had once seemed insurmountable had healed completely, replaced by mutual respect and genuine affection. "You ever regret it?" Faith asked Kieran one evening as they sat on their own porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. "Marrying into such a stubborn family," Kieran laughed, pulling her close. "Never. Your family's stubbornness is matched only by my own, remember. It's what brought us together." Faith rested her head on his shoulder, remembering that pivotal day when her family had locked the door against him, and he had simply sat on the steps, waiting for her to come to him. His patience and determination had changed everything. "I love you, Kieran Maddox," she whispered. "And I love you, Faith Maddox," he replied, sealing his words with a kiss as golden light bathed their home in promise. "Always and forever."